Thank you, Fritz, and to the Weitzman School. It just feels incredible to be recognized on behalf of the office. But we really want to dedicate this award to the community members of South Baltimore and the South Baltimore community. And we also want to recognize our extraordinary clients who are with us here tonight, Ethan Cohen and Brad Rogers. This is Brad. Oh, you know what? We don't have video. We have a great image of Brad in action. So Megan and I were first introduced to the project by Brad as he led us on an epic tour of the site. His enthusiasm, which I think this image captures, his passion, his vision for what the Middle Branch can and should be, has been a constant inspiration and a guiding light. Brad is the executive director of the South Baltimore Gateway Partnership, just recognized by the Maryland Senate. And this was his brainchild. And he has, through this, leveraged tremendous amount of funding. Did you just say over $175 million? It's more than that. To dream big and to bring action. I feel a special connection with Brad. We are both undergraduate degree holders from Haverford College in the Growth of Structure of Cities department. So another planner here, but turned lawyer and environmental management, an environmental management degree from Duke. So Ethan is just incredibly dedicated. He attends to details like none other and facilitated immeasurable amounts of feedback for us on the project that just made it amazing. He has an incredible drive to achieve excellence and has been a motivating force. He went to Yale for architecture. He spent time at City College. There's a connection there. And in New York, but we are so glad he ended up in the City of Baltimore Mayor's office. And also, I'll give a shout out to Odessa, who you can see here, who just brought so much enthusiasm. She's a transportation engineer turned small business owner and engagement specialist who really brought the voice of the community to the table. And I would say that all of us, I think all of us, were motivated by the people of South Baltimore throughout the entire project. On that same evening after our epic tour, we met with community leaders from over 19 neighborhoods, and they were organized and kind and passionate and persevering despite incredible challenges they were facing and still are facing. Pollution and dereliction of their neighborhood in the nearby harbor, a legacy of racist planning, redlining, transportation infrastructure that has scarred and severed neighborhoods, lack of economic opportunities, challenges with mental and physical health, all compounding with the still lasting impacts of COVID-19 and climate change. The challenges at the Middle Branch are significant. This place, in many ways, is a microcosm of the worst issues a city might face within 8 square miles. But through these challenges, the community has persevered because of the strength of their people who live in their neighborhoods, their incredible history, their creativity, and care for one another. And it really has been an honor and a privilege to have worked on the project, leveraging the incredible action already happening and the organizers already happening, Brad and Ethan among them. For us, this project is really a beacon of hope and reflects our values as a practice in an incredible way, but I think hopefully also the trajectory of the profession as a whole. Fritz and team asked us to speak not only about the Middle Branch, but a little bit about field operations. And it feels amazing to do so here. I recognize many of you in the audience. Our office kind of feels like an extension of this school. We are inextricably tied to this place. The office was initiated by James Corner in 1999 while he was still chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture, but growing and evolving with each studio and person that has joined us over the years. Life looks a little bit sunnier post Meyerson Hall days, right? Even now, you all inspire us as we engage with juries. We're so excited to host 3 of you as externs next week. And I know that some of you will continue to inspire us as you graduate and will shape our work in ways we cannot yet anticipate. On this slide, some of you met Aaron this morning. Sorry, Aaron probably is a little shy, doesn't want to see himself up on the screen. But Aaron and Jason are both Penn alums, MLAs in 2021, and were central to our team on this project. And so a big thank you to Weitzman School, all of you motivated and compassionate faculty and students eager to make positive change in the world. When I started as a student, Ellen, who is here, was my 501 professor. I think it may have been her first year teaching. James Corner was still chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture, and he had just written this. Landscape urbanism suggests an exciting new field of possibility that involves understanding the full mix of ingredients that compose a rich urban ecology, a living mat of accumulated layered systems. It views the city as a living ecology and infrastructure as catalysts that perform and produce. With landscape urbanism, the age-old divide between nature and city was transformed into a powerful idea about natural systems and green infrastructure as the very things that should be organizing and shaping our cities. And now, more than 20 years later, our rapidly changing climate, record-breaking heat, devastating storms, floods, droughts, fires, we're still I'm still, shocked at all of the 2023 recaps from sort of record-breaking statistics from last year. But all of this means that the need for our cities to function like resilient landscapes, able to grow, to adapt, to change, is more important than ever. And so too is the need for these urban landscapes to adapt and perform for people, rectifying environmental injustices and supporting our mental, social, and physical health and well-being and our joy. This year's field operation celebrates our 25th year of practice, and we still believe in the power of nature in the city. The High Line, a simple garden walk that forever changed the west side of Manhattan. In Santa Monica, a parking lot is a topographically dynamic urban oasis. And the tunnel tops, opening much more recently, a park on top of a highway that has brought the city to the bay. Soon, the River Ring in Brooklyn will become vital habitat. But these projects are not only successful at an urban scale or for environmental resilience. They're significant in the way they function for people at an intimate human scale. As nature appears in the city, it renders place as a common ground for our social life, our most intimate relationships, our collective cultural expression and identity, our laughter and our play. It is where we make memories and come together to demonstrate, where we have civic discourse, where we exercise and move, but also where sensory stimuli engages our deepest emotions, provides us with comfort and serenity, and with that, a sense of belonging. Really all of the essential, extraordinary experiences of our humanity. So much of our practice is about shifting scales, from large plan and vision to designing for people. And before we dive into the middle branch, I'm going to just touch on 2 other waterfront projects that have been in the office for a decade, because great plans need to come to fruition to affect change. So in that regard, I'm going to offer us all some motivation and inspiration, especially Brad and Ethan, because this is exactly where we are right now on the middle branch. We're launching that process right now. So our 2010 competition entry for a new eco-city in Shanghai was radical in scope and scale. it envisioned a city organized around its waterfront by a series of 5 water fingers. This resilient urban framework was the underpinnings of an integrated approach that defined neighborhoods, transit, energy, economic, and green systems. Fast forward to today, 14 years later, and Shenzhen's 110-acre Guiwan Park anchors the edge of a new tech-focused central business district and is the first of those 5 green fingers to be realized. This is truly extra large-scale green infrastructure for stormwater management, flood protection, biodiversity. Here you can see 3 organizing terraces: the uplands, the freshwater wetlands, and the brackish wetlands. The freshwater wetlands manage stormwater runoff from the city as a living filter. They too are botanically extraordinary. These hybrid landscapes, part performative wilderness, part botanical garden for pleasure and delight. And the mangrove mave, you can see here, composes a soft edge for the Guiwan Channel, a radical change from its previous state. Boardwalks carry people through a dynamic water garden, a place for vital habitat, minnows, a unique setting for discovery and nature in the city. Overall, Guiwan and its relationship to this resilient urban framework showcases the potential for urban growth to achieve both environmental and social impacts. Like Guiwan, now on the west coast of the United States, Seattle is a place that had turned its back on its waterfront. In 2001, the Nisqually earthquake presented the opportunity to fundamentally change this relationship because of the irreparable damage to both Seattle's seawall and its 2-story viaduct. So the city of Seattle decided to bury the waterfront freeway in a massive new bored tunnel, which opened up a huge new territory to rethink, an opportunity to rethink the organization of the city as a whole, developing, expanding, centering, and connecting Seattle's public realm to Elliott Bay. And to reimagine the edge of the city as an ecologically rich, connected green boulevard designed for people and habitat. By thinking about the edge holistically as a place for bike, pedestrian, and also salmon, and by pushing back the seawall, cantilevering the waterfront promenade with a new light-penetrating surface, a shallow habitat shelf is created, repairing a broken migratory line. The seawall now has been successfully overtaken by aquatic vegetation, reconnecting the food chain, and we have fish. And where possible, the seawall was removed completely with soft and gently sloping beaches. And the new bike trail, just opening this past summer with its stormwater gardens, start to provide a meaningful sense of place and to situate the edge in a more watery and verdant landscape that once defined the site. And more to come this summer on this waterfront too. But now the Middle Branch, yet another large-scale waterfront site with equally transformative potential. Unlike Guiwan Park or Seattle's waterfront, which are quite far away, you all have probably experienced the Middle Branch already, even though you don't realize it. Because over 180,000 people pass over this largely forgotten site as they travel along the I-95 corridor each day. The first day we experienced the Middle Branch below the spaghetti of highway infrastructure, what we heard was almost as important as what we saw. The sound of the highway, but also the chatter of some migratory songbirds that stop in Baltimore along the East Coast Flyway. This visceral experience of being on the open water, the cool breeze, the scale of the highway infrastructure surrounding us was kind of terrible, but both awesome and extraordinary. But we didn't only hear the sounds of the site that same day as Brad's epic tour, which was so impressionable. We also heard and were moved by members of the community. And we asked about what is the Middle Branch's greatest asset? And again, we heard the same thing.
good people.
The people. That means the people is a real family vibe.
Strongest asset for the Middle Branch are the neighborhoods that surround it. The communities of South Baltimore are coming together and reclaiming their own waterfront. And they are establishing their rights to be there, they're establishing their own goals, what they want it to be, and they're charting a path for their future. And so the strongest thing that we have going for us is us.
Brad could not have said it better. The Middle Branch shows us how hard it is to overstate the connection between environment and health and equity. And to that end, the scope of our project was perfectly expansive. I think, Fritz, you're right. The project did tick all of those boxes. It also speaks to the power of new green and pedestrian networks to catalyze, improve access and connection, economic equity, cultural vitality, environmental resilience, and health and joy. Our team was also expansive and multidisciplinary. It was not only field operations. As many of you know, we had 16 consulting collaborators, planners, multiple landscape architects, marine engineers, mobility consultants, JEDI consultants, just an extraordinary group of people. And our process was and continues to be expansive as well, and Megan is going to talk about that in much greater detail. All of this really goes back to justice and equity, developing this project as a visionary plan, but also an iterative, community-driven initiative that amplifies voices not only heard. This plan is fundamentally about equity and justice, resilience and health, maybe not its physical transformation in ways, creating new connections, jobs, wealth, and increasing quality of life. I'm going to pass it on to Megan.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for keeping the energy up and excited. I'm so happy to be here tonight, and I'm so happy I've had the great opportunity of working with Brad and Ethan and Sarah, with our consultant team and the people in South Baltimore for the last 4 years to reimagine the place through the plan, and now very exciting through projects coming online, which we're working on now. I'm really thrilled to be able to share the plan with you in depth tonight, and to tell you a bit about sort of what's inside. So I'm going to take a deep dive and look at our planning work over the next 20 minutes, and then we'll sort of wrap up with questions at the end of the evening. I want to start with the work we did with communities, with outreach and engagement. I think Sarah said so well, sort of how important people are to our work at field operations and how important the South Baltimore community is to this project. And our work was emphatically community-driven throughout the whole process. This is our sort of project map, and as you can see, we were doing planning work, and we were doing consistent, varied, and iterative engagement throughout that work, the whole 18 months that we were actively working. We started online because we started during COVID in the summer of 2020. So we were doing virtual workshops when no one had done this before. We were discovering Jamboards on Google and Zoom and sort of stumbling our way through it. At the same time, we were innovating with our local engagement consultants. We had a very active social media feed, and we have an active website to this day. And we also, sort of as we were doing this, we insisted on innovation, and we insisted on our work always benefiting the community as we were moving. We heard from day one that people were really skeptical of plans because nothing happens out of plans. They stay on paper. Action doesn't happen. We're not going to trust that any of these pretty pictures are going to come to fruition. And if they do, it might be in 10 years. So we really took seriously the idea that we have to make change now, and we have to bring benefits now. We did this in small ways. For instance, on our Facebook and Instagram feeds, we did an interview series with members of the community, sort of sort of riffing on Humans of New York, but we interviewed folks, Voices of the Middle Branch, to bring community voices to the project so that it wasn't only us talking about these plans, but it was the community talking about their waterfront and their public space. Once it was safe to be outside and be with each other, we started engagement in person. We created a mobile project hub and we did pop-up engagement. So we were visiting people in their communities at their events rather than always asking people to come to us. And then when we did host events, we placed a big emphasis on community-centered programming and activities. This is an event that we're all really proud of called Splash. Splash was an event that invited neighbors to visit and enjoy and celebrate their waterfront in Middle Branch Park. We partnered with Baltimore Rec and Parks, with local nonprofits to lead Learn to Fish, Learn to Row, and Learn to Canoe programs, promoting access, inclusion, and welcome at the water for everyone who lived very close by, but maybe wasn't using the water, or they didn't feel like the waterfront belonged to them. And sort of at the same time on the side, we got input and feedback on the plan, but that was never the primary reason and impetus for this work. We also utilized the plan as a vehicle for expanded access and inclusion in our own fields of planning and design. We know that our fields of planning and design do not look like the cities we work in, and we take that seriously and wanted our plan and our work to sort of think about that and take that on in an active way. We hired graduate student fellows from Morgan State University, which is Baltimore's local HBCU, to work with us on the plan. So we brought in 5 fellows, paid them for a summer, and they worked alongside us at field operations and some of our other consultant teams. So they did research with us and built out the plan. We also produced with some of our partners, we produced a after-school program for high school students, which introduced those students to the fields of environmental design and planning. And these students served as our youth advisory board as well, so giving us feedback and input on the design. We paid these students. They worked spring and summer in 2021 and created fabulous research projects and interest around the Middle Branch. So I think even before we get to the plan, but we see all of this work as part of the plan. This is the plan. It's sort of the plan in action. And we're really proud that we were able to deliver these benefits alongside the sort of long-term strategic thinking. We also hope that doing this type of work in a plan sort of sets a new standard and precedent for what plans can do, and the type of action plans can take sort of as the plans are being developed. And I think we have Ethan and Brad to thank for supporting these initiatives and these projects throughout the planning process. So now finally, like 30 minutes into our talk, we're gonna get to the plan, get to some of the long-term vision. So we produced over the course of 18 months a sort of 4-volume document. You can read it on our website, reimaginemb.com, if you're interested. We put together a design vision that sort of looks at sort of long-term sort of place-based transformations for the 11 miles of shoreline, for the neighborhoods in South Baltimore. We also put together an implementation strategy that looked at how do you phase this work, how do you permit this work, who is going to fund this work, who is going to manage this work, all really, really important questions to answer as you take on these transformative projects. We collated all of our engagement work to understand how the community feedback shaped the work. And then we also assembled a resource guide that sort of did very deep dives into funding, into anti-displacement, into transportation, et cetera. So starting with a nuanced understanding of the site, the plan considers the Middle Branch at multiple scales. Its place in the larger ecoregion of the Chesapeake to begin. It's such an incredibly enriched and dynamic environment. We asked ourselves, could we restore Middle Branch's shorelines and reconnect to this magnificent ecosystem? We considered the Middle Branch and its role in the city. The city in many ways is defined by its waterfronts, the industrial port, the cultural inner harbor, and we asked ourselves, could we create a green and recreational waterfront at the Middle Branch, distinct and different from these other places? And we considered the site within the context of South Baltimore. This map shows the planned study area, which is quite large, as Sarah noted, 8 square miles. And rather than narrowly define the site as just the water body or just the shoreline, at the heart of this area, we understood the Middle Branch more broadly as 19 neighborhoods, 30 parks, and 11 miles of shoreline. We looked to the history of South Baltimore as we started and the incredible legacy of African American heritage and culture in this area, which included 2 Negro League baseball teams and their stadiums. It was really the heart of the city's civil rights movement, and it houses, and still does today, Mount Auburn Cemetery. We also studied development patterns to really understand what investment, but maybe more importantly, disinvestment, has looked like here over the last 70 years. And along with the mapping and the data collection, we visited every neighborhood and every park in the area to understand and appreciate the challenges, but also the incredible activities and opportunities that the plan needed to reflect. And so the plan is organized into what we're calling 4 equity frameworks. These frameworks structure the work and the recommendations that come out of the plan and focus our efforts in 4 major areas. The first is to protect and restore the shoreline, which is speaking to the Chesapeake and speaking to environmental health. The second is about transforming barriers into connections, so looking at that disinvestment, the idea of slicing neighborhoods and disconnecting neighborhoods and people from their waterfront and from one another. How can we heal those scars? Number 3, how do we activate parks with inclusive programming? So how do we bring people to the parks and open spaces that are there? And then finally, how do we think about equitable development and initiatives across this space to pair with these major public realm investments and improvements? So altogether, the frameworks structure a kind of series of recommendations, short, medium, and long-term recommendations and investments in the Middle Branch. And so this is, if you did have to sum up the plan in one drawing, this would be it, even though it's very difficult to do. It starts to show the kind of mosaic of projects across those 19 neighborhoods, sort of starting at the waterfront and stretching into the neighborhoods, and how we're pairing together transportation work with environmental work, with parks, and with development. I'm going to walk through each of the frameworks for you, starting at the shoreline. The Middle Branch, as we've seen, is this beautiful kind of quiet expanse with great views, access to the water, but there's a lot of challenges, environmental challenges, which you see here on this screen. These are sort of images we took during our initial tour. A lot of this is due to its location. The Middle Branch sits at the base of the Patapsco watershed. And so what this means is that erosion and sediment and all the types of pollution you see are sort of concentrated and drained to the Middle Branch. So the Middle Branch carries this huge burden, and you see that in the poor water quality that's there today. So we mapped this to understand exactly where the outfalls and where the sources were, and then we overlaid on top of that a series of recommendations and improvements to look at the health of the water, the health of the ecosystem, and the shoreline. Really, our plan looks at a continuous living shoreline, 11 miles of continuous living shoreline, soft green and resilient edges that expand the intertidal zone, that protect from flooding and storm surge. This is really what the Middle Branch has been. This is a historic map, sort of pre-industrial map, and you can see this thick gray band are wetlands and marshes of the past. This is the Chesapeake. It no longer looks like that, but this is sort of our North Star in a way. We mapped this over the course of time, sort of thinking about sort of how these edges have been hardened, how channels have been cut, and how we're missing this intertidal zone. And the sort of last image here is our proposal of sort of where we would like to get to in the future with this work. This shoreline, this intertidal zone allows us to create diverse shoreline habitats and areas. So the soft edges are not always the same. There's quite a diverse mix around the edges. And these soft edges are gonna not only create new habitat and new biodiversity and new places for nature and for people, but they're gonna protect the areas they're gonna serve as protection for some of the area's critical infrastructure, including a regional hospital and the Baltimore Gas and Electric plant. The shoreline is also a place for people, offering access to nature, and sort of environmental education. We heard emphatically from the community from the beginning that there was major support for shoreline restoration work. So here, this is sort of survey results from our early work, and you can see that living shoreline improvements were the sort of most popular project that we were proposing. And this extraordinary work is underway. This is Brad at a ribbon cutting for one of the sites. And there's I think this was the FEMA grant award, but there's work underway in design and construction for the start of the shoreline, which is very exciting. Our next framework is about transforming barriers into connections. South Baltimore is filled with transportation infrastructure, as well as industrial areas. All of this network creates barriers, and it really isolates neighborhoods into islands, sort of separating them from one another and from their waterfront. So we're trying to transform this into a new system of connectivity and mobility. Trails, complete streets, connections to transit, connections to water across the area. Our outreach efforts revealed there was a real desire for better pedestrian and bike connections in this area, and so the network really emphasizes this type of mobility. The network centers around a new 3-mile loop trail at the heart of the Middle Branch. There would be separated bike and pedestrian facilities there, and from there, like spokes on a wheel, you would have complete streets and shoreline connections reaching back into neighborhoods. The plan also recommends significant changes and improvements to 2 bridges that cross the Middle Branch. First, the Vietnam Veterans Bridge, which is in the distance. And then here in the foreground, you can see an east-west pedestrian bridge, which would essentially close that loop. For the trail, it would connect neighborhoods of Westport and Mount Winans to the new Baltimore Peninsula development. And it would hopefully offer access to the historic and iconic CSX swing bridge here, which is a real sort of fixture in the water that no one can access today. Our third framework was about the parks, the park system in South Baltimore. Ethan coined the term park shed, like watershed, and we love this idea of a connected system of parks. It's already a place rich with parks, and as we worked with Baltimore Rec and Parks, they said, please no more parks. We have more parks than we can manage. We hear this in Philadelphia too. It's very difficult and costly for cities to manage their park system. So we really looked at, rather than growing the number of parks and expanding park access, but improving the parks, activating the parks, enhancing the parks that were there. So this map starts to show where those improvements and activations might happen. We took cues from a project that was already built, a sort of pilot project in one of the parks around the waterfront. This is the Middle Branch Fitness and Wellness Center, a $25 million facility opened in Reedbird Park during the planning process. And it really serves to activate and animate this park and provide amazing benefits to the communities here. There's pools, there's sports fields, there's community centers, and how could we take the same approach and sort of move that around the entire Middle Branch? We asked people what they wanted to see and do in their parks, and there was a real desire for access to the water, so more water-based recreation. There was a desire for events and for socializing and gathering, and there was a desire for sort of family and fitness activities. So that's what we did. We located new spots for fishing piers and for boating piers around the Middle Branch. We recommended a major expansion of the boathouse into a boating campus that would allow really popular programs today to sort of expand and thrive. Baltimore Community Rowing and Middle Branch Rec and Parks, nature-based recreation. So in existing parks like this is Middle Branch Park today, you can start to see how those new improvements are layered to attract more people and more activity and bring people to their water. So here you can see a new playground and sort of family spaces. Soon we'll go down the hill and you can see a large pavilion. There's a real desire for more spaces to hold family reunions and gatherings and parties. And then larger events like the Cherry Hill Arts and Music Festival that happens every July 4th. And finally, we looked at equitable development. So there was, as you can imagine, there was sort of concerns that, is this work all going to be for the folks in the neighborhoods? We got asked the question a lot, is this for me? This doesn't look like this work is for me. Is this going to raise property values? Am I going to be able to stay in my home? Those were all big concerns that we aim to address in the plan in several different ways. And we look to sort of bring jobs and opportunity and education programs and layer those into the plan along with our public realm improvements and investments. These initiatives were intended to serve the established communities in South Baltimore. We look to sustain and expand investments in workforce development, in small businesses, in CDC capacity building. Brad's organization has, I think, supplied close to $1 million in CDC seed funding over the past 5 years, and more of that is to come and recommended in the plan. We want to continue the youth and education programs that we piloted as part of the plan, so more fellowships, more after-school programs, and the plan calls for the establishment of a new heritage and historic district in South Baltimore to really honor and commemorate the sites, but also take that as an opportunity to kind of celebrate current cultural expression as well. And then find ways to support new green businesses and ventures that could be connected to the projects as they come online. For instance, developing a native plant nursery on site so that the plants needed for the new marshes and the new wetlands and the new green streets are grown in South Baltimore by community members in South Baltimore. And finally, we sort of looked to outline development scenarios for key sites around the Middle Branch that we saw were opportunities for change. Certainly the incinerator site, which is the largest source of air pollution in the city, we think needs to be changed. That is a huge burden on the communities here, and it shouldn't be there. So what can we think of as alternative futures for that site? So just to recap, the plan pulled together many different ideas, as Sarah said, quite expansive, quite multidisciplinary, quite integrated and holistic. The ideas all sort of work within these 4 frameworks and together create a plan for Baltimore's next great waterfront with 11 miles of world-class trails, parks, programs, and economic development. The plan marries a transformative vision with extraordinary action, including over $175 million invested already. The plan is not only possible, but it's already underway. And South Baltimore deserves no less at this moment in time. Reimagine Middle Branch is not too ambitious. It is just ambitious enough. Thank you so much. We invite questions at this time, and we invite you to stay connected to the project on our social channels and our website. All right, we covered it.
I'll ask the question.
Yeah, Lisa.
I'm really impressed with the community engagement work that you did, and that's microphone. I'm impressed with the community engagement work you did, and that's always, as an educator here, it's a challenge to figure out how to teach students about community engagement, partly because we're in and out of neighborhoods and a semester, and we don't have the long-term always engagement over many years. But I'm curious about, if you think back to when you were in school, what you learned, what you would say to students, or how you might think about planting those seeds in a way that's not extractive, that's respectful at the period when students are studying.
I don't know, do I need the mic? I don't know if the tech people can tell me.
You could probably do the podium one.
Oh, the podium mic's fine? Okay. I might also invite Brad and Ethan to help answer this question too. But I think it is very difficult for students in, say, 14 weeks in the term of a studio to think about engaging, learning, being able to layer that into their projects, right? And then they leave. I think something that we learned in this process that I think is very important is we were outsiders too, right? We were sort of coming into a place that we did not know well. And so it's important, it was very important for us on this project and on all of our projects to work with local experts who know the place, who have been in the place for years, who know everyone on a first name basis, right, in communities. And so I think in terms of student, and that was very successful in our work on the Middle Branch and continues to be so. I think the people we work with at the city and the people at Brad's organization are on the ground every day in the communities. And so it's a humbling experience for us, but I think our job in those instances is to listen and to connect and to trust our local partners. And I would say then for students too, that's what's important. It's important for you to listen and for you to be connected to local partners and to trust what they're saying and really try and absorb that into their own work.
I'll add something too. This kind of scrappy videos that we shared, those were done by folks in our office before we actually even meaningfully engaged in the project. I mean, the extraordinary engagement that happened is really thanks to Brad and his organization to put in financial support and effort there. But I think as an office, even when we're doing a design competition, we are riding our bikes around the neighborhood, stopping people, interviewing, and asking the simple question. And really, for us, we knew going in that the people here were so special. And that was just by kind of having some conversations. And any student can do that, and that's so meaningful and rewarding.
If I could hop in on
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
I have a couple of points to make. I have a couple of points to make. The first is that engagement is really a way of writing down partnership. If you really have partnership between yourself and other groups of people, then you end up with information that you can write down. But if you don't have that partnership, then you don't have it is just extractive. It is just asking people to fill in index cards. And, the second thing I would point out is that it was certainly not me who drove the engagement. It was much bigger, and I want to give credit to Ethan for the idea, which really predates even your participation, which is that the engagement began with the community picking the design team, not the other way around. So one of the great things that happened was we had a year-long design competition, and you may remember, you had to go on a date with the community. You had to introduce yourself and talk about your vision and then ask them about what was interesting to them, and they had to decide that you were worth working with. And that empowered the neighborhoods in a way that a traditional model of the city picking someone out of a hat and then dropping them there quickly.
I want to, hi, I'm Colin from City Baltimore, and so it was wonderful to see all that and hear and think back to the beginning, some of the ideas that were inspiring to us at the beginning and stay with the project and go back to those generative ideas as you presented sort of a kernel of ideas. I was thinking today of something I was working on today where I was reviewing a grant proposal for a big federal program. There's a USDOT grant program, and the scope was like one line. This is like $15 million worth of planning work, and it said there will be a PIP, public participant, or whatever that stands for, a public involvement plan. And I said, I think we can flesh that out a little bit more. And actually I listed all the things we did in Reimagine Middle Branch, which they cover everything from social media to this iterative, as you asked, how do you do it? It's really about testing the waters and getting feedback and then analyzing, as the team did with I was like taking notes from your slides about, I need to look at those pie charts again. And so I'm not sure there's an answer except that I think for students it's important to always contextualize the feedback they get. Like I heard this, sometimes we'll be on juries and we hear, well, the community said this. Well, who was that in the community, because that's valuable feedback, but, you know, it's important to understand their role and the context of where you got that information, because there are many voices in the community, and you could broaden the circle of input.
I see a hand in the back.
Hi, yeah, just great plan. Really excited to see it. I wanted to learn a little bit, I guess, about potential outlines for how a lot of the programming and sort of the additional features and facilities included within all the parks and all the facilities. Like, how will that be maintained? There's like ownership structure, because you know, in Philadelphia, as you mentioned, right, a lot of these older cities, I think legacy cities, are keen on, I think, adding a lot of new scope to their projects, and how you think, I guess, the city and sort of the community has imagined how that operation is going to be. I'm definitely thinking that in the context of a lot of projects in Philly as well.
I can start and then I'll hand it off to Brad, I think. You know, I think like a lot of field operations work, we see this as being a public-private partnership. It's going to be as it has been already during the plan. So sort of working closely between Brad's organization, South Baltimore Gateway Partnership, the City of Baltimore, Baltimore Rec and Parks, the Planning Department, and then private developers who are working around the waterfront as well. It's going to be a collaborative effort to operate and maintain and to program these spaces. And I think right now, I think what Brad's organization is doing is sort of organizing the folks on the ground in the communities to activate and program, and supporting those nonprofits and those groups around South Baltimore to come out and activate the parks. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, Brad.
Yeah, I would just add to that on a certain level, the mandate, the charge that we gave to field operations was ridiculous. We were like, okay, so it's 11 miles of shoreline, but it's not just 11 miles of shoreline, it goes deep, deep, deep into the surrounding parkshed, and we're going to make up a term parkshed just to even allow us to begin to talk about this. And it's not just about the environment, it's not just about trails, it's not just about parks, it's not just about jobs, it's not just about cars, it's not just about trains, it's about all of it. And we don't own any of the land, and half the projects we're going to write down are already underway, and the other half are impossible. We don't know where the money's going to come from. And it all has to happen right away because we've got 100 years of failure we're trying to undo. And that, what's in there, is not work that like Ethan can do, or Brad can do, or Sarah or Megan can do. It's work that huge numbers of people have to do. And so the only way that happens is what you write down is what people already want to do and are already trying to do. And then you're helping to empower and elevate that vision and then give it the resources and the platform from which it can succeed. So most of the things that are written down there are not things that we invented. We created a platform on which the community aspiration that they were already working on could be visible, and are now dumping resources into those programs so that they can come to fruition.
Really fabulous work, you guys, really great. I'm wondering if somebody could take a deeper dive into the topic of displacement. Our 11th Street Bridge project garnered a New York Times article. You know, is it possible to do this work and offset the potential effects of displacement? Really big topic, and you know, our experience is, you know, the design team can do so much, the client can do so much, the city has to do more, policy has to enter into conversation. So I don't know who wants to take this.
I mean, I can start. You want to? So, first of all, I take that topic very seriously. At the same time, I feel like the topic is dealt with in very superficial ways in public conversation. The fact of the matter is that neighborhoods are always changing and evolving.
And there's no one way to lock a neighborhood down and trap it in amber and have it remain the same. That sameness is an illusion. Neighborhoods are, people are coming in, people are going out, neighborhoods are getting better, neighborhoods are getting worse. And the important thing from my perspective, and other people are welcome to disagree, is to make sure that that as change happens, the existing residents are beneficiaries of the change and drivers of the change. And as long as they are in a position to be charting a path for their neighborhood, our job is not to keep it from changing, but to have them have some measure of control over what that looks like. And I also feel that, I don't know how things are done in Philadelphia, but the way we generate affordable housing in Baltimore is by driving down the quality of life until everyone who can possibly escape has done so, and everyone left is trapped in a situation which they do not like, but don't have the ability to change. And I don't think that we can continue to generate affordability by making life intolerable for people who are just heroically trying to make it through the day. And so, alleviating burdens on people who are facing tremendous burdens will have the consequence of changing the market perception of that neighborhood. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think that we can, and I'm not suggesting you're proposing this, but we can't continue to follow the Baltimore model of generating affordability forever.
Yeah.
What we have done is put real resources into community control of real estate. So my organization, for example, spent $900,000 providing 3 years of operating support to 3 different community development corporations, helping them grow and hire staff and professionalize their operations. And then we created a new community development fund, a grant program that only community-based nonprofits are able to apply for in order to help them acquire property and drive real estate projects. So we have, between Ethan's funds and our funds, we have about $5 million lined up. And then a network of community development financial institutions representing about $30 million worth of additional resources and the ability to do new markets tax credits and all kinds of other stuff like that. So what I literally have applications now where communities are coming forward with projects they want to build, and there's the money to do the design and get site control and build gap financing in their financial models and stuff like that. And so that's a very empowering way of doing things. But when those vacant houses become not vacant, the houses next door are just going to be worth more. And that's a price we all have to live with. Yeah.
Just thinking back to the plan, and the 11th Street Bridge is a model, so maybe we could do a case study. Just thinking to what the plan has done or what designers can do. So the planners were great at finding opportunity sites. So one strategy also for combating displacement would be, we want more density. These communities, as you saw in the pictures, they've de-densified. They've really withered at the edges because of the industrial transportation uses. So the visions that are here, and that was something the community wanted. They wanted pretty pictures, so to speak, because they wanted to see a different view of what that reflected back to their community. So I think that starts to create some of the market demand or interest for public-private partnerships on some of the big land that had been vacated. There's one of the largest clusters of public housing, 3 in the city of Baltimore are in the neighborhoods that are here, and they all have vacant land because the public housing developments were downsized. And so now the housing authority they saw this plan and they said, oh yeah, we can go through that process. We can redevelop this land and through mixed income housing. So I think it's definitely a challenge, and but just looking at multiple strategies and having those multi-pronged efforts to, as Brad said, for community control of the vision and then finding opportunities for densifying so that more people can share in that vision.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think happens is it depends on the city and the economic conditions. And there isn't one answer here.
Yeah.
Like what's going on in the city of Boston is very interesting when it comes to affordability and displacement. Same thing with our 51 miles along the LA River. Like, there's so many different conditions, and so my takeaway is one size does not fit all here, but I appreciate what you had to say very much. Thank you.
I agree, and I would also say, I mean, the uniqueness of this site is there is space, there is land, right? So densification to go up, but also there's just availability, let's say. And I would say one of the interesting things that we didn't really touch on, you know, our economic advisor through this process was a Philadelphia-based firm, Urbane, and their mission as an organization is thinking about how to build wealth in communities. And so that was a really strong emphasis. So, you know, the initiatives like the nursery on site, sort of all of these strategies were colored by a huge number of interviews they did with local businesses, local communities. You know, the strategy of connectivity was about connecting people to job centers, right? So there was a lot of additional thinking about how do we build wealth for the people who live here, through the project, through connection, through all sorts of other things too. So, I mean, that's part of it too, part of the strategy.
And we've got one more question. I saw somebody with their hand up back there, and that'll be a wrap. And
hi, so you mentioned some of the reluctance of like the Baltimore Parks Department just with expanding parks given the various maintenance and financial needs of upkeeping the park spaces. So did the plan contemplate, I'm not sure like what the management structure is of the various projects within the plan, but was the maintenance involved in implementing this plan addressed as a facet of the plan? And I'm curious like how that factored into the design process.
Sure. I hope I didn't mischaracterize Baltimore Rec and Parks. They're a fabulous partner. We love them. They're great. They're on our working group. We meet with them all the time. They're a wonderful partner, but they face real challenges, right? And we respect and acknowledge those challenges. I think the way that we've thought about sort of maintenance and management of the parks moving forward is that it is a partnership model, that Baltimore Rec and Parks would continue to supply sort of base maintenance, which they do over time. We also want to introduce sort of less maintenance heavy models in parks. So right now everything is lawn, right, with big canopy trees. And Baltimore Rec and Parks has trouble keeping the lawn mowed all summer. So why don't we think about meadows everywhere, which are intensive in the first 5 years, but once they're established are less so. So there's that idea, and I think beyond basic maintenance, a new park, a new governance entity for the Middle Branch would take on all of that management above and beyond, and then would partner with local partners to do programming and activities. So for instance, the boating campus we were talking about, there's an amazing nonprofit, Baltimore Community Rowing, that already does incredible rowing programs there, but they've outgrown their space. They're so popular, there's boats like just falling out of the boathouse. They don't have space to do all the programming they want to do. They need the space. They need that. So I think it goes back to what Brad was saying. It's sort of about there's the partnership between the city and a new governance entity, and then beyond that, there's partnerships with these local groups, so that it's a kind of ecosystem, I would say, of maintenance and management.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
right.